Welcome everyone to this webinar hosted by EVPA and organized by our member Roots of Impact. Before diving into the topic of today, I would like to say that as EVPA, in these terrible days, we stand with Ukraine. We stand with our friends, members and partners who are now dealing with an unjustified war. And we do thank our members that are currently providing funding and any other type of primary support. If you want to know more about ways in which you can engage actively, feel free to reach out to us. So we are EVPA, we are the European Network of Investors for Impact, and we have 300 members, mostly based in Europe, but investing worldwide. And they can use a different type of financial instruments, from grants to loans to equity. And they also engage in different financing mechanisms with other players coming from the space. And in order to support social purpose organizations, social enterprises, NGOs, in order to contribute to solving pressing societal challenges, what they also do is to provide non-financial support and also to measure and manage impact. And this is extremely important, especially when it comes to take a better informed decision while investing. I still remember when in 2017, we were looking for innovative mechanism to include in our report about financing for social impact. And we came across the SINC, the social impact incentives. Then in the latest years, the concept evolved into impact-linked finance, which is a topic to which we already gave visibility last year in the context of our investment for development initiative. And actually, one of the person that is here today with me was already presenting, so Bjorn from Roots of Impact. And recently, one of our members, Jacobs Foundation, also in partnership with Roots of Impact, just launched an impact-linked fund for education in MENA and West Africa. And timely enough, this year we have also started a collaboration with Jacobs on transformative finance. And why we did that and why we believe this topic is important is because there is a need to promote and develop innovative financing solutions to support the social enterprises in order to come to better outcomes, greater impact, and ultimately to systemic change. And my colleagues now can share all the links so that in case you're interested in learning more, you can download all stuff I just mentioned. I'm Alessia Gianoncelli. I'm the head of knowledge, community and market development at EVPA. And today I'm glad to be here with colleagues from Roots of Impact, Bjorn Strower, the person I just mentioned, founder and CEO of Roots of Impact, and Patrizia Baffioni, lead of impact-linked finance programs at Roots of Impact. So Patrizia and Bjorn today will guide us through the concept of impact-linked finance. So without further ado, in case my hosts are fine with starting, I would like to give the floor and to welcome Patrizia and Bjorn. That's perfect because I see the screen. So Patrizia, Bjorn, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alessia. Great to be here.
Good to see you all. Hi.
Great. Happy to get started and present a little bit about impact-linked finance today. In terms of what we thought of presenting to you, we actually wanted to really make it short and sweet and focus on 3 key ideas. If you could go to the next slide, please. The 3 ideas that we would like to present to you are strictly linked to the journey of how we see impact-linked finance, The first one is just the acknowledgement that money, general capital, is waiting at the end of the pipeline, and we will talk in a moment about what it means. The second idea is around impact, meaning that deep impact needs more than traditional finance, in our opinion. And finally, we will present to you what we mean by providing better terms for better impact. Next one. So what do we mean by money is waiting at the end of the pipeline? If you think of high impact enterprises that are really trying to tackle some of the most pressing social and environmental needs we have today, they do struggle to find the right kind of finance for themselves. And what does that mean? Like, why is that the case? Next one. You probably are very familiar with what is called the strategic financing gap. This is basically a critical stage in the development of an enterprise where this enterprise, is out of this very initial startup phase, and so was able to apply for all sorts of grants, but now is looking for some different type of capital in order to be able to scale. However, in this phase, these enterprises are not really able to find the right type of capital because they're perceived as too small and too risky for institutional investors. And looking from the perspective of the investors, you can see for them, these enterprises are really beyond this efficient investment frontier, which means that for the level of risk that they have, the expected returns are too low. And so what ends up happening is that this company is not able to attract investment. And at the same time, investors are not really willing, or are missing something in order to be able to make these investments. And so they end up waiting, what we call at the end of the pipeline, meaning, well, we just invest in enterprises which are investment ready and have everything we need in terms of our risk return expectations. And so here is where the mismatch really happens. So we talked about why money is waiting at the end of the pipeline, but what about focusing also on impact? Because at the end of the day, if we work with impact enterprises, it's because we care about else than just seeing them realizing their commercial potential. Next one. If we look at the impact investment landscape, we realize that investors are not really willing to sacrifice their commercial returns. And so there's plenty of studies, including the one from the GIN, that says that even impact investors seek risk-adjusted market rate returns, and just very few of them, around 15%, are willing to accept below market rate returns, which are closer to capital preservation. And of course, this poses a big question of how different is even impact investing from traditional investing if there is no concessionality implied in their investing activities. Next one. And what we realize and what we really see very clearly at Roots of Impact is that these impact enterprises that have enormous potential for creating an impact both create social value and financial value. And investors typically look mostly at the financial value when it comes to the investment decision. And of course, there has to be social value to be able to make that investment an impact investment. But the reality is that this social value actually matters, and it's something that potentially could be quantified. And if we were able to capture that, if enterprises were able to capture that, they would be probably better off also in terms of presenting themselves as a viable investment target. And so what we see is really that this social value is so important, and yet at the same time, it is not really captured in market prices. Björn, handing over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So what we were developing is actually a solution that would focus exactly on that. So we ask ourselves, what if in a double bottom line business, social return would really matter equally to financial returns? And this comes with actually, as you can see here, rewarding or even paying social entrepreneurs or impact entrepreneurs, however you call it, for the value they create, for the value to society, for all the value you have seen on the slide before, if you would actually compensate this gap with financial means. Next slide, please. And this was actually how social impact incentives came into play. Oops. And here you see a headline from 2016, actually, when social impact incentives were launched in Latin America. And I like very much this headline because it's very much capturing what we want to do. It's about tilting businesses towards the needs of the poor or to any other disadvantaged target groups, or simply to increase and optimize for social impact. That's what social impact incentives are aiming to. So it's targeted to businesses that they can actually improve their social performance. Next slide, please. And you might know, of course, you know all about carbon credits, and it's quite a similar concept, but just for the rest of the SDGs. So what if we just monetize this value? Then it looks like this. From an entrepreneur perspective, it actually increases the income. And if you are paying out these incentives over a certain time, then you actually improve the P&L so that investors would be attracted from the better commercial profile of the enterprise. Just through additional cash flow, it feels very much like additional revenue generated by social outcomes. Next, please. Over to you, Beck, for a case study example.
Great. Let's dive directly into an example so that you can get a better idea of what we mean by paying for social outcomes. Akista is a company based out of the Netherlands that saw potential in tackling the issue of poor irrigation for smallholder farmers. If we look at the problem at large, next slide, please. Basically, 1.6 billion people around the world live in economic water scarce areas, and farmers really struggle with that because this means that they can only grow food during rainy seasons, and they're really subject to seasonal fluctuations, and irrigation is not very well developed. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, only 5% of the land harvested is irrigated. And so Akista saw an opportunity in building and providing to the communities hydro-powered pumps that would help irrigate the fields all year round. And when Akista started, they were very successful in selling to governments and large NGOs, so like big numbers of these pumps. However, they also saw potential in offering these pumps to end farmers, so allowing end farmers to purchase this pump, and to do so, to make it easier for the farmers to purchase it, they developed a pay after harvest model where the farmers would repay for the pump in installments after they're able to harvest their crop, and so they have liquidity to be able to pay for it. And so when we talked to Akista, we saw potential in really pushing this new business line, because we saw that it could be much more impactful in reaching farmers that otherwise wouldn't have access to this pump. Next one. And what we have done with Akista was to sign a SINC contract, social impact incentives, of up to 250,000 euros. That was signed already last year, and we will see the first results in a few months. And what we wanted to focus on with this contract was to help Akista increase the percentage of the pumps that were sold via the pay after harvest model. So really this B2C, much more farmer friendly, and really reaching those that wouldn't have access otherwise. And then we also saw how the sale of these pumps would have an impact on the farmer's annual income. And so this is also something that we are tracking and are going to reward the company for increasing the income of the farmers. And in parallel, because SINC goes with investment in parallel, the company was able to raise €1 million investment. And here you can see just an overview of the different transactions that we closed or in preparation around the world. We have been working in a variety of sectors, from healthcare to employment and education, Latin America, to water and sanitation. And currently we are preparing several sector facilities. So the one that Alessia mentioned in education was just launched. We are preparing a bigger impacting fund for WASH, as well as one focused on gender inclusive fintech. And just to go maybe a little bit more in detail on how SINC actually works, here you can see the key stakeholders involved in this transaction. So basically the SINC itself is just this agreement between the outcome payer on the left-hand side of the graph and the impact enterprise, where the outcome payer commits to pay the company upon the achievement of certain social outcomes. There is a closing condition in the contract that the enterprise needs to raise investment in parallel. This is important because we really are looking for enterprises that are raising investment to scale, and we want to support them with these impact incentive payments in order to help them maintain their impact focus and keep on growing and scaling with impact, and also with deepening their impact. And so on the other side of the graph, you see really the investment contract with the investor. It's important to mention that there is no predefined investor that the enterprise has to engage with. So we believe that the enterprise should be able to choose the investor they prefer, and also it's open to any form of instrument. It can be equity, debt, mezzanine type of instruments. And as also Björn mentioned, SINC is really this additional revenue stream that will then help the company be more successful, and so this will, benefit all the parties involved. In terms of the suitability criteria for SINC, of course, we are looking for enterprises that have a strong evidence for creating positive impact. This is a precondition for being able to promise payments for a certain type of outcome. High scalability is, of course, something that we are looking for, because we really want the companies to reach a certain scale where they can create massive impact and over time also become commercially self-sustainable. Very important as well to be able to measure direct and measurable outcomes or proxies for those. Not going to go into too many details, but the idea is really that the enterprise has in place certain impact measurement and management system, so that we can be sure about this data and also project what is going to happen in the future. And finally, here we are really addressing a market failure. So it's the idea that we recognize that impact enterprises often struggle with creating impact and at the same time being profitable, because sometimes creating more impact can translate into less revenues, reaching vulnerable groups or last mile population, and in general doing things that not everyone else is doing, of course, leads to lower profitability. And so this is where we also tailor the incentives in a way that we are able to help the enterprise overcome these tensions that they see in their model. And this leads us to the third idea about better terms for better impact.
Yeah, let me take over this. So if Sync is actually a blended finance solution and should provide us with the answer if we want to mix grants and investment in an appropriate way, what would be more natural actually than linking it to the social value an entrepreneur or enterprise is creating? After a while, after a few years of working with Sync, we came to the conclusion, well, the principle of rewarding entrepreneurs for their impact can actually be built also in other financial instruments. Then it would probably not be a blended finance instrument, but just a straightforward instrument used by impact first investors or investors for impact. And so it's just not about paying entrepreneurs, it's about rewarding them in different forms. And the basic idea behind that is super simple, right? We want the best companies in the world in terms of impact, of course, to have really access to low-cost capital. And the better they are creating the impact, the lower cost the capital should have. And this would automatically lead to the fact that these enterprises are scaling and actually delivering more of this impact. Can you please go to the next slide? So again, starting with a headline, it's not just Roots of Impact practicing it. There are others, investors who are already experimenting with impact-linked finance. In this specific case here, you can see Beneficial Returns, an impact investor active in Latin America that uses impact-linked loans with a simple but powerful idea of reducing the interest rate according to achievement of impact. Next slide, please. And in 2018, we did work a little bit with the Boston Consulting Group to actually define this concept a bit more. And also, this was the moment when the term impact-linked finance was coined. And we defined it as an investment practice which is actually placed at the intersection between blended finance, impact investing, and results-based finance, which means actually it shares criteria from all these practices. At the same time, it differs from all of these practices. And what it is concretely, also, by the way, compared to impact bonds, we are working with businesses. So this incentives are targeted towards market-based solutions, market-based organizations, can be non-profits or for-profits, but run as a business with earned income. And it's about rewarding them for their positive impact they generate. So positive externalities monetized. And this can have different forms. If you go to the next slide. For example, and then I hand over to Patricia again, it can be an impact-linked loan as seen with beneficial returns. We are very much in favor of impact-linked revenue share agreements because these type of instruments are also very flexible for very early stage enterprises. And going back to Sync, you can even structure a Sync in a way that is reimbursable if certain profitability triggers are met in the future. So then it's not just an instrument that pays the enterprise over a certain time horizon, but also gets converted for example, into a loan or something else, which is reimbursable. Back to you, Patricia.
Great. Let's zoom into a impact-linked loan. It's the concept is quite straightforward. Imagine providing a loan to an enterprise at a certain interest rate, and then reducing this interest rate if the company is able to meet certain performance criteria, like impact performance. I think what is interesting from a conceptual point of view is imagining that this interest rate can even become negative, meaning that potentially, depending on the level of concessionality of an investor or funder, if they join forces, could be also a partial forgiveness of the principal amount. And again, here it's just a bilateral agreement between an investor and an impact enterprise. And there could be an outcome funder that is, for example, compensating the investor for that interest rate reduction. But then again, in this case, the outcome funder would only pay that small portion of the interest rate that it's being forgiven. And they're basically, for that amount of money, paying for the social outcomes being generated. But let's see how that works through another example. Gravity is a company based in Mexico that provides access to home appliances to unbanked people in the state of Mexico. And so the problem of having access to appliances in Mexico is a very big one, and this is due basically to the fact that a lot of people do not have access to a bank account, and so they cannot take on a loan or also just save enough money in order to be able to buy certain products. And some of the numbers here are really impressive in terms of solar water heaters. The market penetration is really, really low, but that is also for washing machines or refrigerators, for example. And what Gravity does is connecting unbanked families and providing them with these household appliances via a buy now, pay later solution. So very much, again, paying in installments until basically they're able to purchase for the product. And the company is quite an early stage one. They started in 2019, but they experienced significant growth. And when we engaged with them, we saw potential, again, to reach even more vulnerable communities. Next slide, please. So in this case, through a revenue sharing agreement, we were able to incentivize Gravity to increase the reach of the most vulnerable population. In Mexico, there is a socioeconomic strata division, and so we are able to identify from the segment C or below, according to this national statistics ranking. And also in order to ensure that the company, as they're scaling, are also able to continue delivering an outstanding service, we are measuring the promoter score as a means of checking for the service quality. And in this case, we provided the company with 5 million Mexican pesos loan, which is roughly 220,000 euros. So we actually partner up with an investor in this case that was providing the loan, and we agreed on a loan forgiveness of up to 30%. And yeah, again, we signed this contract last year, and it's going to run for another year and a half. And interestingly enough, alongside this loan, the company was able to attract an additional $2.5 million from venture capital, and keeps on growing and scaling massively. Next one. Okay, so in terms of lessons learned, just to share with you a few points on what we have seen in the past years based on our experience with impact-linked finance is that really enterprises, the right type of enterprise that we are really looking for are those that have a good impact measurement and management practice. And we realize that this is not always the case. And actually, there is even potential for preparing these enterprises to first build this impact measurement and management system to then get them to a point where they can be ready to receive impact-linked finance. But that was probably the #1 criterion that we have seen of what was missing in the market. Of course, technology-enabled enterprises are just easier to work with because they tend to collect a large amount of data also about their beneficiaries in a way that is GDPR compliant, but so we see a lot of potential in working with data-driven and technology-enabled companies. However, this is not always the case. Like also other non-tech companies are definitely good targets for impact-linked finance. Something that we always put a lot of emphasis on is also to co-create incentives with the entrepreneurs. So it's not arriving and having an idea of how a company could better scale its impact and imposing some metrics. It's really having a conversation and exchanging with the enterprise to reach a point where the entrepreneur is really committed to generating that additional impact, understands what it means, and then we basically define metrics that are feasible but also attainable and are really additional. And of course, focusing on specific sectors is what allows efficiencies to be generated. This is why right now we are focusing on launching bigger sector-specific facilities, just because it's also easier from our side to generate scale and also make the entire process easier and more efficient overall. And one thing which is key also in the entire process of understanding, if you can go back, there's one point missing. So what is really important is to try to understand where the additionality is, like how impact incentives can provide additionality. And this can take really multiple forms. It can be impact additionality, financial additionality. And again, there are you can break it down into like many different types, and it's really about understanding what is the right intervention to provide with those impact incentives. And Sync that we presented at the beginning is only one tool of the impact-linked finance toolbox, because at the end of the day, impact rewards can be integrated in any financial instrument. So think of also, if there are investors or funders in this room, think of the type of financial instruments you're providing and ask yourself, can I actually embed impact incentives? And the answer is probably yes. So what is next? We are actually very happy to have partnered with EVPA, and we have been discussing for a long time on what type of value can we create also with our experience in impact-linked finance. And we actually came up with the idea of launching an impact-linked finance bootcamp, which would be a program directed to public and catalytic funders. If you go to the next slide, thank you. It is really a program that would be open to EVPA members who are interested in understanding better how to put in practice impact-linked finance. Again, with all the underlying ideas that we presented today. So it's about supporting market-based organizations in scaling and optimizing their impact, and the idea of linking financial rewards in any financial instrument would be really the core of what we will be presenting in this program. Next slide, please. The program is structured in several modules, starting really with explaining what is the state of play of blended finance, impact investing, results-based finance, and then walking the participants through a tailored approach, really covering all the steps of the design and structuring of such transactions. And finally, also having mentoring sessions. And this entire program has a duration of 3 months. And it's actually sponsored by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. So also wanted to put it out there. It's something that we really wanted to give and offer to as many organizations as possible, although there is a close number of participants. But if you would be interested in knowing more, please reach out. We will be actually asking participants, interested participants, to apply. So there's a link that I'm very happy to share. If you can go to the next slide, we can perhaps also copy the link and share it in the chat, so that anyone who is interested can actually check out both the selection criteria and the survey in order to apply for this opportunity. I don't know if Alessia, you wanted to chip in. Just wanted to highlight again, we are running this in partnership with EVPA. So those who wish to participate should be part of the EVPA network.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Patrizia and Bjorn. And as you know, being one of the authors of the report in 2017, I was already a big fan of these mechanisms. So I'm happy that we finally managed to put something together. We received lots of questions already. Again, as said, you will also receive a follow-up email where there will be links. My colleagues are including them into the chat now, in case you are interested more in the membership to then access also the bootcamp. This is something that we can assess. Maybe Patrizia, Bjorn, I can read some of the questions and you can try to answer maybe, because I think we still have 15 minutes. I don't know, Bjorn, if there is something else you wanted to add at the end of the presentation.
Well, just a quick comment. How far this whole practice is different probably from impact investing and even from impact first investing and other types of venture philanthropy. I think what is very, very important to keep in mind, and this is one of our core beliefs, is that enterprises which are active at the market, they face so many different challenges that they every single day, they need to make decisions. And these decisions can either be beneficial for their impact or not beneficial. Sometimes, in particular, when a pandemic hits them, they have to make hard decisions just to survive, and providing rewards for actually continuing delivering social value to the most in need can really keep them on track and even deepen their impact. That's the whole idea. It's not about selecting an enterprise, finding them eligible for a certain set of criteria and then finance them and wait how they are developing. No, it's really about encouraging them on their way to further create and deepen the impact. That's the whole idea. And also I've seen a few of the questions, happy that we go through it one by one.
Yeah, okay. And also maybe since there is a question on impact measurement and management, maybe we can just add that we are going to do a module. One of the module of the training is on impact measurement and management, and also considering the experience that we as EVPA had on this topic, we're going to run it together because we just launched a report where there are tips for investors to really implement and take into consideration impact alongside process and the strategy, the investment strategy and investment process. Also how to collaborate with social purpose organizations to co-create this IMM system that we were discussing about. So Maybe we can clarify, because I think, Patrizia, at certain point you were talking about who are the typical outcome funders, outcome payers. Maybe we can re-stress this information to see what are the most suitable organizations that should take part into this mechanism.
Of course. So when we talk about outcome funder, this can be really any type of organization that is willing to provide payments for impact. In the past, and we are still working with them, one of our biggest partners are developing agencies that are also interested in engaging more and more with the private sector. So they found our approach very interesting, but we also had development banks and, for example, foundations or NGOs that are receiving also public funding. So it's mostly this public, but even private funding that wants to be deployed for creating more impact. We do also work with investors, especially when it comes to providing impact-linked loans. The caveat is always that these investors need to be able to provide concessional capital, because this is the whole point of the story. If you're looking for market-based returns and you're not willing to decrease your return expectations for more impact, then the whole point of the story is missing.
Thank you. And I've seen that my colleague Gianluca shared the link to the bootcamp, so you can have all the information. You can find all the information also in the chat. And there is a first question on the case that you have discussed. So on Akista example, how does the business model of Akista differs from buy now, buy later concept? And then also, for example, could Klarna be considered as creating social value? So these two questions were the first ones coming from the same person. So I don't know whether Patrizia or Bjorn, you would like to give an answer to that.
I'm happy to start, and then Bjorn, if you feel like chipping in, go ahead. So Akista, yes, it is very much the buy now, pay later. I think that the way they define it, pay after harvest, it's just the difference that this later is defined a little bit more precisely, meaning that Akista understood that the farmers will have the right liquidity only after they're able to harvest their crops and sell them in the market. So it is very much that same model, but there they really just wanted to put the accent on when the harvest happens, then the farmers can pay back for the pump. And in terms of Klarna, so I know a Klarna, which is a fintech. So I hope you're talking about the same one. And so if your question is whether a fintech can create social value, I would say it depends what type of value and how you would quantify that. So of course, giving access to financial services to people is something that can be deemed creating positive impact. At the same time, if you don't really go into the details of who are the clients you're serving, what is their profile in terms of access to alternatives, in terms of capacity to repay, for example, any credit that they're taking out, of course, you're not able to quantify that impact. And it could be very much as well that fintechs can create negative impact. Think of those that are just providing credit to people who are not able to repay it, or they don't have the knowledge on how to save enough money to be able to then also become more financially healthy. And so what we are actually doing soon with this impact link fund for gender inclusive fintech is going to be really working with fintech companies that have potential to create large gender impact, meaning, for example, having more women accessing those services when they didn't have them before, and also making sure that the way they're using the money, or the way this access to credit or to a bank account is being provided to them, can really lead to positive social outcomes. I hope that that is the Klarna you were talking about.
But just to add, like independently whether this is the Klarna you meant, I strongly believe every business has an impact, and in many situations it could make sense to reward any business to optimize the positive impact. And from a perspective of an outcome funder or even an investor, I think whenever an outcome is generated or created less expensive than it could be done by an alternative, then it would make a lot of sense to incentivize a company to do so and go this route.
Thank you, Patrizia and Bjorn. And there is a specific question on financing smallholder farmers. So about the challenges, the precise challenges linked to this kind of segment to support. And the question is also, how do you deal with smallholder farmers who lack a credit history or have limited collateral? So any thoughts about it? Can you elaborate more?
So we, as such, do not work directly with the farmers. These are the enterprises that we support. We actually also worked and are still working with a agricultural lender. So the idea is to really find the right organizations out there that understand the need of the farmers and are able to provide them with the right products or the right form of credit that can suit their needs. And then the way we are able to see whether these are really good organizations is really about asking questions on their impact. So what changes, how farmers are able to grow their crops, to be able to further develop and grow their businesses. And I think this is the approach that we have for every sector. So even when it comes to vocational training, we're never the ones understanding what is the issue in a country and going and providing a training, but it's finding the right local players who really cracked the nut of that issue and just enabling them to be able to scale their impact further.
Okay, so thank you, Patrizia, and yeah, happy to share that Klarna that you discussed about was the Klarna meant by the participants. So thank you, Olga, for confirming. And there is a question which is maybe more linked to the concept that we also talk about as a VPA about tailor financing. I don't know whether this is relevant for the discussion of today, but I would like to ask you this question and then maybe add something from our point of view. So what are the criteria that are usually evaluated before choosing a financing instrument from your experience, of course? And we normally talk about the contents, the organizational readiness, the risk. But yeah, do you have any specific comment on that? And what are those that are mostly looked at when it comes to making the decision of investing?
Yeah, maybe I start with that. Because we started with Sync for a good reason. We were most interested in supporting enterprises where we would see they would be able to raise investment if they would get a little bit of support on the impact side by actually monetizing the social value. And this works very well, but over time we also realized there are other types of enterprises who could actually benefit from a direct capital injection. The smaller ticket sizes, small impact-linked soft loans, also not requiring collateral, or impact-linked, in particular, impact-linked revenue share agreements. And we use these instruments mainly for companies where we know, hey, they still need some time until they are able to raise, for example, impact investment capital. Then we are probably the first ever investor into these companies. However, we invest then typically also with a link to impact, but also provide the capital in a form of impact-linked revenue-based loan or impact-linked loans, etc. And we don't see loans necessarily as an instrument that can only be used by companies with a stable cash flow, right? It depends very much on how you structure the loans. It can be structured in a way that it's extremely flexible for the enterprises.
Patrizia, do you want to add something?
No, just that it's really a question of experience, and as we move forward and also work in new facilities, we see that certain sectors can be prone to using certain instruments and not others. I'm thinking specifically of water and sanitation, where the whole sector is still very heavily grant reliant, and we have seen that there is also a huge difference between companies which are able to raise investment, like sanitation companies really struggle to attract any type of repayable investment. And so I think also that is one thing we look at. It's not only the stage of development, it can be the sector, the type of product they're offering, and then we really try to be very tailored and to create the right type of solution for the enterprise we work with.
And thank you for this assist, because this was exactly what I wanted to say, because when I was mentioning the report where we included the SYNC back in 2017, the report was also about the concept of tailored financing. So really this idea that if you're an investor for impact, and for us, again, investors can use grant and also repayable finance. So it's not really linked to the way in which they finance. They should be really, they should care about the needs of the social purpose organization. So really looking into life cycle, but also, as you said, the sector, the business model, the capacity also of the entrepreneurs itself to take on some instruments, and then come up with a tailored solution. So this is extremely important for us. And then, of course, as evolution, we have all these blended and hybrid mechanisms that can suit even better sometimes the needs of the entrepreneurs. So I think that, voila, maybe the last question that came just in now, I think it's super interesting. How labor intensive is putting a deal together? I think it's an interesting question, and we can maybe close the webinar with this one. Patrizia, Bjorn?
You want to start, Patrizia?
Yeah, so I think if you're just starting off for the first time, of course, there is a number of things that need to be understood, and I think efficiencies come with experience. I'm trying to think also, like when we run our programs, how that works, but I just would like to say that also one of the reasons why we are doing this bootcamp is that we understood that this is not so easy. However, we've been doing that for a few years now, and we really are now in the process of structuring our processes and also building tools that can then enable other practitioners to be able to understand this practice faster and be able to apply it maybe not from day one. And so this is also why the whole program is designed in a way that we don't only present like the theory, which is still very practice driven, but then provide the tools and also do specific individual mentoring sessions that can really address funders' needs, or if a funder already has ideas, to be able to walk them into how to get into implementation. I would say in terms of labor intensity, so in our work, especially with SYNC, we do not perform the entire, for example, financial due diligence as a typical investor. There is still a thorough impact due diligence, but overall, it is like in terms of work days, I don't know how to even quantify the amount, but it's something that still requires a certain due diligence to be made, and then depending on the instrument and the terms, an entire part of just putting the terms together in a term sheet. But again, if you have these templates and tools, it actually gets much easier.
I would like to answer with a bit of a provocative statement. So if an investor for impact takes impact serious, then it should be rather a similar effort put into an impact-linked deal than in any other deal, because you would dig deep into the impact questions and trying to understand also the potential for the future. And you would dig deep also on the commercial side and asking questions about self-sustainability over time, etc. And then maybe you have an additional work step, which is about the incentive scheme linked to the forecast on the impact side, but that's really then the cherry on the cake. So I think this impact conversation is sometimes a bit falling short, and impact-linked finance is just a practice where you need to have a very concrete understanding about the potential for future impact.
And we must say it when someone has fun, I mean, time flies. So we can summarize this. I think that we shared all the information that our participants wanted to receive. As said, everything will be included on the website, the recording, the slides, our contacts, and then of course for all those that are not EVPA members that are interested in taking this opportunity, we can then have an additional discussion. Thank you so much, Patricia and Bjorn. It was really cool. Looking forward to continuing this collaboration.
Thanks a lot.
For having us.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.